this week in Retrospect. Back in '92, local students weigh in on one of the biggest debates in Canadian history.
The unity question that has baffled politicians for years is now being tackled by students. Students from 100 schools across Canada are now debating the constitutional proposal with the help of an unlikely source, Century 21 Real Estate of Canada. A company spokesman says the president developed an educational package for students to see the different sides of the unity battle.
That in Canada, after 125 years, there's still a lot of dispute between cultures and languages. And he felt that the bottom root of that was that Canadians needed to develop the ability to be able to understand each other better. And that the best way to do that was teach young people today the techniques of conflict resolution.
The Notre Dame School in Bonnyville decided to use the package. This grade 12 French class is debating the sovereignty issue and distinct society clause. And other students say they now think they understand the issues surrounding the Constitution.
First you're on a yes side and then you're on a no side, and I think it's real difficult to make a decision on exactly what side I am on.
Quebec will get their way and they'll separate from Canada, and then Canada will probably fall apart from it.
A social studies teacher says the package does give students some tough issues to tackle, but he also says the text is flawed with errors in grammar and spelling, and he only used it after making his own modifications. Paul Monahan says the package is basically a good idea, it just may be expecting too much of students.
I think it's far too reaching to hand somebody a lesson and say in 2 days you're going to solve Canada's problems. You can't do that. The politicians of the country are trying. You can't expect 16-year-old students to suddenly say, hey, we can solve everything that the politicians couldn't do. Yes, they can examine it, but certainly we shouldn't give them the impression that they can solve Canada's constitutional crisis.
But the president of Century 21 does think student input could have an effect on the October referendum. Gary Charlwood supports a yes vote, and he's challenging students to write a prize-winning essay on how they think they could resolve the constitutional crisis. The winning essay will be given to Joe Clark.
And just beat it. A record-breaking beat breaks ground in Blackfoot back in '97.
It's certainly the biggest beat I've ever seen. Remember last year we told you about Doug Paul's 14.5-inch beat? Well, the Blackfoot area resident has done it again. This year's monster tips the scales at 5¼ pounds and measures 19.5 inches in circumference.
And it's the same kind of tire with the same kind of dirt in it. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. Well, that's to show you now, the leaves are still coming. And that thing would grow to be 30 inches, I bet you, if we let it grow.
No fertilizer or any other growth supplements were used, and while he's not exactly sure why his beets ballooned to massive proportions, Paul does have a few theories.
I think it's the weeds. Well, one way you go around the tire, you can pull the weeds out, keep it clean. And I think it's the heat of the tire building up over the night that keeps it, over the day, it keeps the tire warm during the night.
To find another oversized vegetable, just look down the road. Paul's neighbor Ruby Dunlop has a whole crop of supersized spuds and overweight onions, and she has some theories of her own.
One of the things I did was, one of the secrets is good deep tillage of your garden soil and keeping the weeds out.
This potato weighs in at a little over 3 pounds, and Dunlop says it'll probably take herself and her husband a week to eat. Josh Clausen, NewsHour.
And that's all for this week in Retrospect.